Do you have knee pains when you do squats or when you do lunges? Look, trust me, I understand knee pain. You can see I have a steel rod in my left knee, 3 pins and 5 screws. I've worked around knee pain in the past. Now, the biggest sources of knee pain for people on squats and lunges, there's actually 3 of them. One of them is going to be biomechanics. Are you doing the exercise correctly? We're going to show you the highlights of what to look for to make sure that you're doing things correctly. The second thing to look at is actually the strength that you have. Sometimes people just put too much weight on their joints and their muscles are not yet ready to accept all of that weight. This is especially common if you are just starting out and you probably have a couple extra pounds to lose. We'll teach you some workarounds to work around this limitation. And then finally, look, if you're like me, there's a chance that there's a structural problem. Maybe your knee just is not a traditional knee. Let me tell you, most knees aren't supposed to have steel rods in them. If that's the case, I'm going to give you a couple workarounds that might make the exercise more viable and take pain away. So the first thing that we want to address today is the biomechanics of it. So we want to look at what the knee does when it is in a squat or a lunge position. So a proper squat should look like kind of like what I'm about to demonstrate. The first thing we want to talk about is the foot setup. So my feet, the inside of my toe is going to be about even with the outside of my shoulder. And that should be true for about both sides. And that's going to be just a little bit wider than my hips to get to that shoulder width. If you're in a little bit too narrow, that can put a little extra pressure here. And if you're out too wide, that's going to put inside pressure on the inside of the knees. So having it where you have just outside shoulder width should be the most comfortable. As for toe position, I don't really care. You can have the feet straight ahead, or you can have the toes slightly turned out. I don't want them to be excessively turned out. That's going to be really bad for your knee as well. But somewhere between 0 and about 15 degrees. The reality is everybody's got a slightly different femoral head that goes into their hip. And without doing an MRI scan, it's impossible to say definitively which foot position's best for you. You'll just kind of play around and find what's comfortable. So from there, the exercise should start with the hips. The hips will come back and then the knees go out. And if you can do that, that gives you a nice position to squat into. And then from the side, what you're going to notice is that at the bottom, the knees should not be extending beyond the toes. The biggest point of pain for people, and I'm going to demonstrate this with my good knee, is when their knee goes too far forward at the bottom. That's going to put too much pressure on the front and cause some pains. To prevent that, make sure that you're starting this motion with the hips softening backwards, and then the knees go outwards instead of forward. So hips back, knees out. The biggest mistake on lunges that people will make is that on a forward lunges are just kind of bad for people with bad knees. If forward lunges hurt, don't do a forward lunge. But on something like a reverse lunge, oftentimes when people go down, they'll push that knee forward. Like we talked about with the squat, that's going to be a bad biomechanics and put too much pressure on the knee. What you're going to want to do instead is really ensure on lunges that your knee stays above the ankle. That's going to allow for the best distribution of weight so that you're not putting force improperly on an overly bent knee. So those biomechanical tips can take away a lot of pain for people. But what if the problem is the second problem? What if it's a strength issue? If you think your knee pain might be caused by a strength issue, what we can do is we can actually offload some of our body weight onto an object. We can do this in 2 different ways. I'm going to show you an assisted squat today where I'm going to use a sturdy object to give me support. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab onto this shelf unit And then as I squat back, some of my weight is gonna be in my arms, and that's gonna put less weight in my legs. So my legs require less strength to stabilize the joint. There's less weight in my legs and less pressure on the joint, and that's gonna allow me to squat through a fuller range of motion with no pain. You can also do this with a lunge exercise. If I come in a little bit closer and then I step back, again, some of my weight's being put onto the shelf instead of my legs, and then I can come back up. You can also do assisted exercises like this with a suspension strap, and I'll put a link in the comment section down below to show you a demonstration of what that looks like. Another great way to get support while you develop more strength for a squatting exercise is to actually rest on another object. So you can see I've got an exercise bench over here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand next to the bench, and then same good biomechanics. I'm gonna start with my hips back, knees go apart to go down, and then I'm actually gonna rest here on this bench just for a moment. That gives me a little bit of break, and then I'm gonna come back up, pushing my feet through the ground to come straight up. Now, what that does is there's a lot of force in that transition from down to up. By resting on the object for that moment, you take away all of that force in that transition period so that you're not putting as much force on your knee and not needing as much strength at your current level. So if you're like me and you're one of the blessed few that have a structurally different knee, there's some other approaches that we have to consider. The first one you might have noticed as I was doing squats earlier, I was wearing specialized shoes. These are a specialized pair of weightlifting shoes, and as you can see, they've got a really big heel lift here. So the space between the heel and the toe is quite dramatic. Now, I'll admit, these shoes are not the cheapest shoes in the world, and for how specialized of a function it is, it may not be worth it investing. But if you don't have the shoes, what else can you do? The easiest substitution for that heel lift is to just have a couple of weight plates and then put these underneath your heels so that your toes are on the ground and your heels are lifted up. Let me show you what that looks like. So you can see I've got a couple of weight plates on the ground. They're in the same stance that my squats would be. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place my heel on them, toes stay on the ground, and then using good biomechanics, I'm just gonna go down into a squat. Now the reason why a heel lift works for people with structurally different knees is it repositions your whole body weight as you go down so that you're putting a little bit more weight into the hips and slightly less into the knee. And all the weight that you are putting into the knee is loaded at a different angle. So it's not putting as much stress, as much rotational stress right there on the joint. And it'll keep you squatting happier and pain-free. And then one last adjustment you can make on this is, the reality is, unless you're competing in a powerlifting meet or maybe a CrossFit competition, there are no rules. There are no squat police that are gonna get mad at you if you do a half rep. Now, if pain requires you to make modifications, it's totally okay to do a squat and end here where it's pain-free, although it's maybe a half rep, and then to come back up. As you build strength, you may eventually develop the strength to support the knee to go an inch lower, or you may not, and that's okay. If you're doing a half rep and this is a pain-free range of motion, well then baby, that's what your squat looks like. And you can do that with full permission from me because there are no squat police that are gonna get mad at you and put you into prison if you try to hurt your knee with a full squat. You have permission to modify exercises to make them pain-free. Hey, what's up? Steve Picks here. Hey, thanks for watching that video. Look, you saw my knee. You know I understand what it's like and how debilitating it can be to have pain in your knees when you're squatting. So if this video helped you, can you do me a favor? Can you give me a like down below? It helps spread it through the YouTube algorithm so that more people with knee pain can find solutions just like you did. So if this helped you, if this opened your eyes to how to do this exercise pain-free, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. And while you're down there, make sure you hit a like so that other people can see this video.